Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Sunday Supplement. Coming up on today's show, it's the first week of the Premier League season and it's all kicking off already. Paul Pogba, he breaks his silence. He tells Jose Mourinho to trust him after scoring in Manchester United's first win of the new season against Leicester on Friday night. Chelsea, they begin yet another new era under Maurizio Sarri with an eye-catching 3-0 victory at Huddersfield. And it's all change at Arsenal. Stan Kroenke prepares to mop up Alisher Usmanov's shareholding and take the club into private ownership. Appearing in public today, Martin Samuel, he's the chief sports writer at The Mail. Vaishali Bhardwaj is a sports journalist with the Evening Standard. And Sam Wallace is the chief football writer at The Telegraph. Good morning to you all, good to see you all. Thanks for coming in. If you can tweet, don't forget to tweet the show at Sunday Sup. The best will appear on screen over the next 90 minutes. OK, let's have a look at some of the headlines making the back pages of the papers this morning. This is The Mail on Sunday, and this is Paul Pogba. I'd get fined if I told the truth. Well, he can afford it, but he does give us a little bit of insight into his relationship with Jose Mourinho. We're coming on to that in part one straight away this morning on the Sunday Supplement, on the back page of The Sun as well. Jose, he's in the Poghouse. We'll come on to that in a moment. A couple of transfer stories back of the Express. Real Madrid, they turn the heat up on Chelsea. They want Eden Hazard. They are prepared to break the bank to sign him. Martin loves that story, don't you? Lift off. Sam hot-footed it down from Huddersfield. He watched Chelsea, the new era, a big win for them yesterday, big win from Maurizio Sarri in his first game in charge, first official game in charge, 3-0 at Huddersfield yesterday. Interesting story, this one, from Tom Hopkinson, back of the People. It's on the back of the Mirror as well. Fox and Hull, this is called Claude Puel, about to be fired by Leicester. They lost on Friday night at Old Trafford against Manchester United. The first game of the season, he'll be rewarded with the sack and replaced by Roberto Martinez and Thierry Henry. That's according to Tom in the People this morning. The Star, they also reflect on Paul Pogba. It's all quiet. It's not really, though. It never is, whereas Jose Mourinho and Manchester United are concerned, and that's exactly where we'll start this morning, because the quote from Paul Pogba is fascinating, Martin. It does give us a little bit of an insight into his relationship with Jose Mourinho, and says, look, if I had my say, if I told you chapter and verse,
there's stuff I can say and stuff I can't.
I'd be in a lot of trouble. Captain on Friday night for Manchester United, though. He did score in their victory over Leicester. But what does it tell us about the relationship between Paul Pogba and Jose Mourinho as things stand?
It's never really handy when your best player is talking cryptically about his relationship with the manager, which is what he's doing. I'd like to say this, but I can't. Clearly, it's not right. There's a lot of relationships at United that are not right at the moment. You've got the chief exec sort of getting his retaliation in early because he thinks that the manager at some stage is going to dig him out over the transfers. So he, by the sounds of it, there was some sort of briefing or whatever last week from the executive end of Manchester United that suggests there's a disconnect with the manager there. The manager then goes into his press conference, talks about the transfer market again, is again, by implication, critical of the club. Then you've got the captain on the night coming out and talking in riddles about his own relationship with the manager. None of it sounds... none of it is particularly healthy. Despite this, Pogba had a great game. That wasn't the worst result. You know, I know people are saying that, they went 1-0 up and, then they tried to shut up shop. They didn't try to shut up shop. Leicester are not a bad team. How Claude Puel was under pressure after that one match, God only knows, because Leicester actually played quite well, and Manchester United then suddenly had to work a lot harder and defend, and they couldn't just go gung-ho against Leicester, because you can't. So, actually, there's not a huge amount wrong with Manchester. There shouldn't be a huge amount wrong with Manchester United. But it appears there is this disconnect now between two or three of the major players within the club, the chief executive, the manager, and the star player. That's no good.
Can they recover? Can it be repaired?
If you look at their team, it will recover, because if you've got enough good players on the field, you'll win more than you lose. But
you're muddling through.
But yeah, it's not happy, and sooner or later there is going to be a circumstance that is going to bring all of that to a head, and that is possibly finishing behind Manchester City and Liverpool this season. Yeah.
And Manchester United fans wouldn't be happy with that. Yeah. Neither would Mourinho. But Charlotte, is it sustainable when the star player, the club's record signing, Paul Pogba, is talking in the way that he is about his relationship with Mourinho?
It's not great. I mean, he also came out on Instagram, didn't he, after the game, and he said, you know, I'll always give everything to my teammates and the fans. He didn't say the manager. It isn't sustainable, I don't think. But
he also referenced Michael Carrick as well, who's now, of course, jumped up to become one of the coaches. Yeah,
absolutely. But I think a really good move from Mourinho was actually making Pogba captain on the night, on a week when everyone was talking about whether or not Pogba wants to leave following his World Cup success with France. He handed him that challenge of, look, you want to be our star player. I mean, he obviously is the star player, but look, here's the chance for you to go and captain the side out in the absence of Valencia. I mean, it was actually interesting in the summer when he made Valencia captain. Mourinho listed a whole sort of list of players who could actually come up and replace Valencia if he was ever injured or couldn't play. He didn't actually talk about Pogba. So for him to make Pogba captain was a huge statement of intent, I thought, from Mourinho. I think it was him trying to build bridges with Pogba and also send out a clear message out to his critics and journalists. You know, people have been writing these stories about him that actually my relationship is good, but then Pogba comes out with these cryptic messages and it doesn't send a message that everything is all right in the camp. But I think for Pogba now, unless he was to move to a foreign club, I don't think United obviously going to sell him before the end of the transfer window. But you know, things like making him captain, I think things like playing him in his preferred position, giving him a bit more freedom, I think, on the pitch, that will make him a little bit happier on the pitch in the short term, but it needs to be repaired in the long term so that he doesn't feel like he wants to move next summer.
Sam, is this just the Jose way? Is this what we've come to expect? We've had years of experience of him in this country, certainly with Chelsea twice, and of course, when he was at Inter Milan, before that with Porto, and of course in between all that Real Madrid too.
He does pick fights with players, there's no question. If things don't go well, he is ultra defensive. I mean, there's no doubt about it, he's super thin-skinned. And he protects his reputation that he's built so assiduously. He protects it tenaciously. And he will go to war with anyone who tries to sort of damage the Jose brand, whether that's whatever club he's at who do or don't buy him the players, or his star players themselves. I mean, the sign-off at Chelsea after that Leicester defeat where he accused his players of betrayal was astonishing. And I think we all knew as soon as he said that was it. It was game over. The club would have to get rid of him. And in fact, Chelsea stuck by him a lot longer than they would have. They had done historically. They had done historically with other managers. And this sort of troika of figures at United. So you're talking about the executive, Ed Woodward, who's unquestionably the most powerful man at Manchester United. There is literally no manager that could challenge him in terms of his relationship with the Glazers. The manager, Jose Mourinho, and Paul Pogba, their highest profile player. I don't know if he's their star player, but he's certainly their highest profile player. I actually think that the weakest of the three is Mourinho. I think that there was never any question that United would sell or let him go to Barcelona. Not Barcelona could afford him anyway. They haven't got the money to make those kind of signings. They tried to throw some pretty mediocre players in my view. I think that the one that is the weakest of those three is Mourinho. And surprised though I am by what Pogba has said, because I think this is pretty bold. I think that shows that. I think that shows Pogba's confidence that I'm at this club. I've been told I'm a crucial part of its on-field and commercial success, and I'm actually going to go very close to saying what I want. I don't think there's any question that a player would have said that under the Fergie years, because you'd have been finished.
You'd have been out. It did feel to me, Sam, that the message there was, I'll be here a lot longer than you.
I couldn't agree more. And what Pogba and a lot of top players would have realised this summer is that the days when Real Madrid and Barcelona could come and sort of launch that kind of transfer shock and awe, where they just buy players out of the Premier League. They're over now. So they're certainly over for the time being. And so he's going to be a Manchester United player for a while. And I think this was. Although people will say, well, it's only one line and it's quite subtle. It's all in the nuance. It's all in the.
And Jose will get the nuance.
And Jose will understand.
And there will be a response, because there always is. And Jose never lets it lie.
And he understands power. Jose Mourinho understands power and how power works, because he's had a lot of it over his career, and he understands that this is a player flexing his or demonstrating the power that he has.
Mourinho. He kind of had his say in the summer, didn't he, when he said, well, it's not down to us it's down to Paul what he gets from us, not the other way around.
Sense. A lot of what he said about Pogba in the summer made sense. It was when he was talking about how the World Cup camp would have worked for Pogba in terms of he was shut off from all the outside influences. It was a close. All he could do was think about football. You're just in this intense little bubble. That's not very different to what everyone has been saying about Paul Pogba for a couple of years now at Manchester United, that there's too much going on around him, and if he just concentrated on his football, what a player he could be for them. It was all the sort of the caveats afterwards, and it came out over a succession of interviews. If you look at that, you can piece together one line from like 2 or 3 different interviews that end up as quite a devastating criticism of Pogba. But you've got to take one line from there and one line from there, because he dripped it out. He knew exactly what he was doing, and it was clearly intended to motivate. It was clearly intended to make him focused with Manchester United, as he was with France. Without a doubt, he was impressed that Pogba stuck his hand up and wanted to play against Leicester, because, you know, he was talking about being short of bodies and his brave boys and all of this, and Pogba said, right, I'll play. He got the captaincy, he played very, very well, but Mourinho will notice that. Mourinho will notice that little line, or nuance, or whatever it may be. He will notice that, and there will be a response, because there always is.
How will he react, Vaishali? Monday morning, Paul Pogba, Jose Mourinho in for training. What kind of will the atmosphere be tense? Will it be frosty?
I don't think it will. I think Mourinho, he's a very good manager. You know, when he's talking to players, everyone says that he actually has a really good he creates a really good atmosphere on the training ground. I don't think he will do it on the training ground. I think it will be through us guys, the media. It will be in the press conference next week. That's when he might come out and say something about Pogba, or he will suggest something that we'll think, oh, actually, he's aimed at Pogba. I don't think he will create that kind of negative atmosphere on the training pitches.
I would agree.
Sam, you wrote a pretty informed piece, or very informed piece, shall I say that? Pretty informed, very informed.
Yeah, the initial one.
That's why I went back. I like to make the guests feel good on this programme.
I feel great. It's a real boost, that thing.
It was an excellent piece, Sam, about United's transfer business, their strategy and their policy over the summer. What was your reading? What was your interpretation of their transfer dealings, but the frustration that Mourinho has articulated about their failure to sign a central defender in particular?
Well, I think, it has come down to there were lots of positions he wanted strengthened, and a few of them were, but it has come down in the last few weeks to the central defensive vacancy. As he's actually got 5 centre-halves at the club, and most teams have 4. The club's feelings that, that none of the options that were there were particularly good. Jerome, we'll just run through them. Jerome Boateng, obviously, I think he hasn't played more than 19 league games for Bayern in any of the last 3 seasons. Godan was just a suggestion from an agent, and it turned, as you wrote, into a new contract for Godan. Toby Alderweireld, there was never an offer. Yerry Mina, apparently before the World Cup, he was being offered for €11 million by Barcelona, who only signed him in January, and was felt to be not at that level. So the club, the notion was that there was never any bid for Varane, but the notion was that if a player of Varane's quality, arguably the best centre half in the world, was available, then there would be no limit to what they would. Well, there'd be no limit. They would spend a lot of money on him.
They would do what they can.
So
to get him, yeah.
I think that's perfectly sound reasoning. They've spent 60 million over the previous 2 summers on Eric Bailly and Victor Lindelof. I don't think. There are many legitimate criticisms of the Glazers, which I would thoroughly back, but I don't think spending money has been an issue. No. I don't think even the most militant United fans would say that they've certainly spent a lot of money, and I think there comes a time where they say, look, what those that are gettable are just at a price where it doesn't make any financial sense. And transfer windows are about buying players, and as Spurs have demonstrated, they're also about not buying players. And I think good transfer dealings are sometimes, and we'll come on to Spurs, that's a separate story, but good transfer husbandry is sometimes saying no, and I think I would agree with that analysis, the way that United have gone about that.
Is the perceived tensions between Woodward and Mourinho, are they genuine?
I just don't think there can be any tension when one person is running the club and will run the club for as long as he wants to, and that's Ed Woodward, and the other is the manager, who is, I'm afraid, replaceable. And as Jose Mourinho said himself on Friday night, rather, I think with a bit of a bitter edge to it, he said that maybe I should be called the head coach. Well, that's what you are. I mean, you have been sacked before, and like it or not, I mean, you're incredibly well rewarded. These are great contracts these managers are on, but there's at clubs now that there's a different model. The days of Clough and Ferguson and Shankly, and by the way, you know, 2 or 3 of those were pushed out in the end. Those are over. I mean, that debate has been had and finished, and these clubs are run according to their owners and the way they want to spend their money.
Manager is a term from English football's past. When the manager of the club was literally the manager of the club, he was the secretary as much as he was the old idea of the club secretary. He was the club secretary as much as he was the manager.
But
that's what it is. So we still call these guys managers because that's what they were. That's what Herbert Chapman was. He was the manager of the club. And you go back through time and you look at the duties that these guys performed. They didn't just run the team, they were the fixtures secretary, they were everything. I mean, they managed the club. And it's moved on. And on the continent, these guys have been called coaches for a long, long time because there is a general secretary, there is a chief executive, and there is a director of football. And it's only us that still refers routinely to the guy that is standing on the bench as the manager.
Just helps us out when we're writing, doesn't it? When we're looking for another, we've got boss, gaffer,
exactly.
head coach. Oh, let's
Exactly.
manager.
Yeah, but it is. We have got a sort of archaic way of, dealing with it. Even the phrase gaffer. I mean, who calls anyone gaffer anymore? I mean, it's a building site term.
I mean, your boss Lee claims.
No, he
likes it.
Lee likes it. Lee likes it. But I mean, But it's it's a term off a building site, gaffer.
Well, it's a nod back to British football's great roots in its industrial past, where your gaffer was your foreman and he was the man that if he said jump, you jumped.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, on a wider point, the role has changed considerably, and I don't think we've caught up with it. Maybe amongst the fans, maybe in the media. We're not in the mindset of this new cadre of owners who really see them as just as dispensable as the players.
I mean, I remember Antonio Conte used to go on about this very point in press conferences. If anyone's called him a manager, he said, "I'm not a manager. I don't have that power of a transfer. I am a head coach. I'm out there. I'm not sitting with my feet up in an office." He actually said that once. And it was quite interesting. It's quite funny as well. He said, "I'm out there on the pitches. I'm actually training these players and coaching them. That is what I am, a head coach." He's very specific about the difference between a manager and a head coach.
Well, do you think they should have more power? Do you think they should be... Because Conte wanted more power when he won the title in his first season, and then believes that he should be given more resources, more power, more control at the club. How difficult, though, is it for the clubs, in Chelsea's example, but of course historically there's been so many other examples of controlling the manager, the head coach, whatever we're going to call them?
I think clubs need to back their managers, I think, at times more when they... Because at the end of the day, if you as an owner are taking... Like, we look at United, for example. They obviously have a clear idea about where they want to take the team. They have backed Mourinho with money, but they would like a team more for the future. We know Mourinho's teams, generally, he likes tried and tested players, more experienced players. They have backed him in the transfer market, but I think sometimes clubs do have to back their managers a bit more. But at the same time, you've seen with Arsene Wenger at Arsenal, where a manager has perhaps too much power at times. Does it become a bit stale? Are they changing things up? Are they moving forward enough? I think it's a bit tricky. It depends on the club, I think.
Yeah, sure. OK, we're going to move on to talk about another manager actually now, which is Maurizio Sarri. He got off to a great start in the Premier League yesterday. A 3-0 win at Huddersfield. Sam was there for it. We'll talk to him more about that in a moment. Guests are still getting used to the new music. They'll love it after a while.
We're back on, aren't we?
We're back. We are back on. Recognise this man? Smiling little face. He's with us today, Sam Wallace. He was at Huddersfield yesterday to watch Chelsea win 3-0. Another new era. First impressions, Sam, of the new manager, the new setup, the new look, the new team, the new formation?
Well, I certainly watched him in the Community Shield, and I think we all thought there's a long way to go. There's obviously, as there was with Conte by October of his first season, there's a strong idea there of how to play. and some players will go with it and some won't. I mean, there's winners and losers in this change. I mean, Victor Moses is obviously one of the losers. He went from being a starter to on the bench. What they're clearly going to try and do is press teams really high up the pitch, and that's pretty brave for the. I don't think it was Huddersfield would concede it wasn't the most sophisticated performance, but from them, and they were punished for it. But for the first 15 minutes, Chelsea were really on the back foot because Huddersfield were full of energy and enthusiasm, really got after them. But what it's easy to forget about Chelsea is there's so many good players there. I know they've got far too many, and another small army out on loan, but players like Pedro and Willian. And then when the master comes off the bench, Eden Hazard, he's just on a different level. So I think that there's a little bit of a narrative that's developed over the last week or so since the Community Shield that Sarri's got this impossible job and poor bloke. I mean, this is Chelsea over the last 15 years have consistently had great players, and it's no different now. They've effortlessly seen off whatever Real Madrid were planning with Eden Hazard, and there's a great team in there. Whether it's a team that's quite good enough to challenge for the title yet, maybe not. But I would, if I think Chelsea fans would be quite encouraged. Of course, it will depend on how long the whole Sarri ball thing clicks. But Jorginho looked a lot better than he did the previous weekend, and I think they're obviously a group of players that are used to change, so that will benefit Sarri.
They do make a lot of changes, Vaishali. Did they have to make this one? Because it still feels a little bit uncomfortable that a guy who won the Premier League title in his first season, won the FA Cup last season, is sacked eventually sacked, shall we say, but we knew he was going to be sacked, and is replaced by the Napoli manager.
I think
Napoli head coach, sorry.
Head coach.
I want to continue the theme of the show, of course.
Absolutely. I think in the end, what really sealed Antonio Conte's fate was the fact that he fell out with so many players, and there were also all the rumblings about that he had fallen out with the board over his lack of control.
But does it matter if you're winning?
No, but then last season they didn't end in the Champions League spots, and I think if they had ended in the Champions League spots, I mean, they won the FA Cup, which was a small consolation, but the fact is they didn't end in that all-important top four. If they had, it might have been a little bit different, but I just think he wasn't happy. A lot of the players weren't happy. Players like David Luiz, for example, who've been brought back into Sarri's system, he had fallen out with a lot of the players, and I think essentially that is what called an end to his time at Chelsea. It is sad because he did do really well in that first season, winning the Premier League title, but as Sam mentioned, there's always change at Chelsea, and if things aren't quite right, they're more than happy to kind of get rid of the manager, even if it costs them quite a lot of money, as in this case. Is
Sarri the answer? The short-term, temporary answer. That's Chelsea's model, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. He's a bit of a brave appointment, I think, considering he hasn't won a trophy. He didn't win at Napoli, but I think what the Chelsea board looked at was the way that he set up his Napoli teams. And, we know Abramovich wants attacking football, entertaining football, thrilling football at Stamford Bridge. Under Conte, you kind of got that in the first season with a 3-4-3, but last season it was terrible to watch at times, 3-5-2, and, it was so defensive. It wasn't great to watch. But they saw under Napoli, they really challenged for the Serie A title. They finished in second. I think they had 2 second-place finishes and a third-place finish under Sarri. They played such a good brand of football, and you are starting to see signs of that now as well at Chelsea. I know Huddersfield wasn't the biggest test for them. Arsenal's going to be a big test for them next weekend, but with the 4-3-3, it is much more attacking. You've got Jorginho sitting and more in a defensive midfield role. Kante, now he's allowed to kind of roam forward. He scored yesterday, obviously, as well. And it's much more attacking, and I think it's going to be a bit more thrilling. So I think short-term wise, it was a bit of a brave appointment, but I think it signals the kind of football that Chelsea want to see at Stamford Bridge now.
Yeah. Martin, the transfer dealings of the club, so we, of course, at the World Cup, when Eden Hazard talked about his future and said, I think we all know the club that I would like to join. It looks, we're pretty sure that he will that he will stay, even though we know that Real Madrid can still try to buy him, can still try to unsettle him. The decision to sell Courtois as well, to bring in a new goalkeeper with Kepa. Is Chelsea's transfer strategy, their business that they've done over the summer, has it been productive?
Well, what are they now? They're £37 million down on a goalkeeper to buy a guy with a lot less experience than Courtois had. So, I mean, that situation there is utterly ridiculous. But Sam's point about the good players that they've got, I mean, it's driving me nuts how many managers keep talking down their team, having spent 300 million quid and, having players to burn, basically, guys, 30 people out on loan and the internationals coming off the bench going, oh, well, you won't see the best of us until February. And you think, oh, come on, mate, Klopp.
Is that like us coming off the break of the World Cup?
Klopp talk crazy expectations.
You're going to say to leaders, oh, Gaffer,
exactly. I'll be really on the mark about March. Klopp, crazy expectations. What are you talking about? I mean, they reached the Champions League final. There was 2 European finals in, 3 years, 4 years? The team that won the league, they beat them 3 times out of 4 last season. Why are these crazy expectations? They broke the world record for a goalkeeper, then Chelsea broke it a couple of weeks later. They're meant to be useless as well, Chelsea. They're being played right down. And you think, come on, I saw Chelsea against Huddersfield. I mean, Chelsea were very, very good at the weekend. They're playing Huddersfield. They didn't look so good against Manchester City. Manchester City are clearly the benchmark. They're clearly the team to beat. But Chelsea, I thought, looked very, very comfortable against Huddersfield. I never thought there was any stage at which Huddersfield had a prayer. And you looked at the 1-11 of Huddersfield and looked at the 1-11 of Chelsea, and it's going to be like that most weeks. You look at the 1-11 of Chelsea and the 1-11 of the team they're playing and think, well, no one from that side of the team sheet can get in the team on that side of the team sheet, so there's only going to be one winner here today. So, in terms of their transfer dealings, they're so well set up over the years that they can afford to be £37 million down on a goalkeeper to buy a guy with less experience. It's not the worst thing in the world. The new keeper isn't going to be the worst goalkeeper in the world. I don't think he's going to be Courtois, and Sarri said that at the weekend. He said he's not where Courtois is. So, that's a little step, but it's a little step backwards. But it's not much of a step backwards in real terms.
What did you? How did you feel about Courtois' behaviour in the last 2 days of the transfer window? Does it leave? Did he refuse to return to Chelsea to train? And does it leave a sour taste in the mouth after his service, and I'd say distinguished service as a Chelsea goalkeeper as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely leaves a sour taste in the mouth for a lot of Chelsea fans. They're quite angry at the fact that he just didn't turn up for pre-season training, and that was him essentially saying to Chelsea, you basically have to sell me. Similar to what Diego Costa did last season. The only difference was Courtois didn't sort of start posting pictures of himself jet skiing around the place. He didn't go that far, but he didn't show up for pre-season training, and he forced Chelsea's hand. He wanted to move to Real Madrid. There was an offer there. Chelsea were hoping he would return, so there'd be further talks with Sarri. He actually talked to Sarri last week on the phone. Sarri was quite optimistic that perhaps he might be convinced to stay, but him not showing up forced Chelsea's hand. They were in a bit of a panic and obviously spent £71.6 million on Kepa in the end. It does leave a sour taste in the mouth because he as you mentioned, distinguished service. And Chelsea did feel that Courtois was there. They'd hoped he would be their goalkeeper for a long time. He was the future. And I think that's why they've gone out and spent a world record transfer fee on Kepa. They hope that being 23, that he will be what Courtois was meant to be there for a decade, be like Petr Cech, be there for a very long time. But it didn't end well for Courtois, and we've seen it's not been that great for Atletico as well. He's got a plaque actually outside Atletico's new ground. It's already been spray painted and graffitied, so they're not happy that he's joined their arch rivals as well. But for Courtois, it's an excellent move. It's one he really couldn't turn down, especially because he's going to be closer to his kids in Madrid as well.
Yeah. Can we contrast Courtois' behaviour with Eden Hazard? You watched him yesterday with 14 minutes. You said he was a level above anything else on the field, Sam. But his behaviour in terms of, OK, we know at the World Cup he said, everybody knows the club I'd like to join. But since then, he's been very, very, very quiet, very dignified. Will it stay like that over the next few days?
I think interestingly, the only way that Real Madrid, because I don't think they've got the money, well, I know they haven't got the money to pay the kind of upfront 150+ 100+ million fee that it would take to sign Hazard. The only thing they probably would have hoped was that he would have made life so difficult for Chelsea that it would have become a consideration. Something I still don't think they would have done, but and he's not that sort of, he's just not that sort of bloke. He's a very sort of happy soul. Sometimes that's been used as a criticism that he's not as sort of obsessed with goal scoring as Ronaldo and Messi, and that's why he's not quite on the top tier. But there was the one difference that Courtois obviously only had a year left on his contract, and he was much more prepared to force the issue. I think for Hazard, he's kind of the footballer that a lot of people would like to be. He's just he goes on the pitch, takes a few players on, scores goals. He sometimes sets a few up. Sometimes his stats are, if you look at it just baldly in terms of the stats, they just don't measure up to the greats of the era. But he's just a kind of joyful footballer, and he's very low maintenance considering his standing in the game. Even the way he delivered that sort of, I might leave after I think it was after the third and fourth place playoff, wasn't it? It was done very sort of with a certain charm to it, really. And
we were very thankful to him at the time because we were scratching around and wondering what to write.
There wasn't much happening, was there? He's a wonderful footballer, and maybe if he was a bit more of a kind of self-obsessed narcissist, he would be one of the greatest players in the world. You know, well, he is one, but the greatest player in the world. He's not, and I quite like him the way he is, to be honest. I think he's a nice guy.
Can anyone deny him that move though to Real Madrid at some stage, Martin? Has he, in terms of length of service, quality of service, and his commitment to Chelsea over the last few years since his move from Lille? Could anyone deny him?
I don't think it's Chelsea's business to make Real Madrid happy. So yes, they can. Don't sign the contract, wind the contract down.
It wouldn't be a great deal of ill feeling, though, would there? I think if Hazard eventually left.
Rivals. They're rivals. It's not. Chelsea's rivals aren't Fulham. Fulham might think Chelsea are their rivals, but they're not anymore. Chelsea's rivals are. Yeah, they sing. Yeah, exactly. But they're not. There's a lot of clubs sing about other clubs, and those other clubs don't actually know they
Come on,
exist.
let's dismiss a few. Let's dismiss a few rivals.
No. I've done that in print.
West Ham Tottenham, does that exist?
No, it's West Ham Tottenham. It's West Ham Millwall. It's the West Ham Millwall one that. Millwall and West Ham. But Millwall and West Ham are never in the same division. West Ham still are obsessed with Chelsea. And Chelsea have left West Ham behind. It's it's all this sort of stuff.
So what's West Ham's game then?
West Ham's game was always Tottenham.
No, okay, what is it now?
West Ham's game was always Tottenham. I don't know what West Ham's game is now, mate. Oh, it's still Chelsea. It's still Chelsea to the fans, but in reality, are West Ham level with Chelsea? No, they're not. So, but what I mean is, Chelsea's rivals are Real Madrid. You don't solve Real Madrid's problems for them any way than you'd solve Manchester United's problems for them. So, it's not a case of whether can we deny him this dream move. Well, yeah, you can, because it's not in your business interests to make Real Madrid happy.
Absolutely, and you're buying into this notion that somehow that every great player must end up at Real Madrid.
Yeah.
Why?
Exactly.
That's what Real Madrid would like you to think, but everyone else doesn't have to believe that. And we've kind of
what
been
about the glamour,
conditioned.
the history, the white shirt being a Galactico?
But there's 25 other top clubs all across Europe who all think that they're the greatest clubs. Bayern Munich think they're the greatest club that's ever existed. Manchester United definitely do. I dare say Liverpool do as well.
I've been at Port Vale when they ran out to simply the best. Port Vale, right? So, let's be honest.
There's this notion that that's the high, that for some reason that's the highest honour, and maybe
I think it's Robbie Williams, isn't it? Let me entertain you.
I don't know if it is now, but back then, I've never forgotten it. Port Vale ran out to simply the best. You think it's a reach, really.
Everybody in the world.
So you're a one-club man, is what you're saying. So
I think
you would sign on. You would sign on like Gary Neville. Here's the contract. Just sign here.
Everyone has the club that they in their mind's eye that they see as the peak of football, and for lots and lots of people that's different. And Real Madrid have done a great job in the 21st century of making most people believe that the inevitable path for every footballer is to end up playing for Real Madrid. All I'm saying is that for years and years, that wasn't the case. It wasn't the case in the 80s when AC Milan or Juventus were the peak. Sure. And in the 70s, it was different again. I mean, Real Madrid didn't win the European Cup from, I think it was 68 till 98, I think. So you don't have to buy into that narrative. And I think what's quite interesting about Marina Granovskaya, who is obviously a new kind of football executive, is that she doesn't believe that either. And you're entitled to do that. You're entitled to believe that, as Arsene Wenger would say, and this, everyone believes they have the most beautiful wife at home, and that everyone's entitled to have their own opinion on their particular loyalty.
Are you like me, Vaishali? Do you dream big?
Yes. I also think, off the back of that point, that it does also matter if a player is South American or Spanish, because they grow up watching Real Madrid games, Barcelona games, and for them that is the pinnacle of football. But I think it's different if you are perhaps English, or if you maybe French or Belgium. Like, I think it is a little bit different. I think with Hazard as well, something that helped him was that Zidane's gone. He really, I mean, I think his dream is to play at Real Madrid at some point, but certainly he wanted to play under Zidane. That is his idol, and the fact that Zidane's gone kind of helped Chelsea's cause a little bit, because but I also agree, he's not the kind of guy who would force a move through. It also helps his family is here. He loves the kind of support he gets from the Chelsea fans. He's loved it. When he came on in second half against Lyon last week, he got a standing ovation and he loved it. You know, he's very much adored there. And he's not the kind of player who will force through a move. So, yeah, I don't see him going just yet. But in the future, I can actually see him going to Real Madrid.
Eventually,
I think he might want that challenge, particularly if he doesn't win the Champions League at Chelsea.
Yeah.
Or they struggle, maybe top 4, or struggle winning the Premier League.
Yeah, sure. OK, still to be played out, but we think Eden Hazard will stay certainly in the rest of this summer transfer window, but could go on to Real Madrid at some point in the future. OK, next up, we're going to talk about domestic transfer window closing. Of course, that closed earlier than usual this week. We'll talk about Everton, Tottenham, Newcastle. It's all coming up here in part 3. Welcome back with us this morning, Martin Samuel. Doesn't like the new music, do you?
Well, I can't hear the new music.
Oh, you can't?
That's the problem.
Right, okay.
So I keep talking over it.
We'll turn it up for the start of part 4. Shall we? OK, Vaishali's here. Big fan?
Yes. Love it.
I'm waiting for your drum solo that you said you were going to play.
I'll do that in time. It's a work in progress. You're a stickler for facts, aren't you, Sam?
Yes, I've made a mistake. Real Madrid did not win the European Cup between 1966, not 1968, when obviously Manchester United beat Benfica.
It's something...
and 1998.
Did someone pull you up on Twitter?
They did. I'd like to think. I think it was Edward Keogh, so thank you to him.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Edward. Don't forget you can tweet the show at Sunday Sup. The best, and of course you can correct our guests as well during the course of the programme. Here are the back pages of the papers this morning, Mail on Sunday. I'd get fined if I told the truth. He can afford it. Paul Pogba talking about his relationship with Jose Mourinho. Of course, he scored on Friday night against Leicester. Jose is in the Poghouse, so we'll see how that relationship develops or deteriorates over the next few days. Chelsea have lift off a 3-0 victory, thumping 3-0 victory for them in Maurizio Sarri's first game. Sam was there, clinical Chelsea. They're too hot to handle for Huddersfield. The back page of the Expresso, they do say that Real Madrid are about to turn the heat up on Chelsea. This is over Eden Hazard, £200 million for him, according to the Express this morning. And finally, the Sunday People, Fox in a Hole. This is Claude Puel. Tom Hopkinson says he's about to be sacked by Leicester. They lost that first game of the season in the Premier League on Friday. He will be replaced by Roberto Martinez and Thierry Henry. Remarkable story. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But just want to have a chat about the transfer window, Martin. One of your favourite subjects, of course, a hobby horse. Feelings on the
stupidity of it,
Okay. So, what are your thoughts on the change of the date? How it went? We'll get into some of the clubs and their dealings or lack of investment. Tottenham, for example, in a moment. But thoughts on the change of the date first of all.
It's stupid, absolutely stupid, harebrained, half-baked. Because nobody can trust themselves just to say no. Nobody can trust themselves to sit across the table and say, tell you what, I won't nick any of your players after August the 9th, you don't nick any of mine, and we all agreed, and everyone goes to separate ways and sticks to that agreement. That's all you needed. You could even have put it in writing, because we could have a domestic embargo, and then you're still free to trade with Europe. But the ramifications of it will be ongoing, because you've now got a situation. It's not about Eden Hazard going to Real Madrid, because Chelsea can just say no to that, and that will go away. The ramifications of it are that Europe. One of the ramifications that Europe can now look. Teams that have got a surplus of players and stuff, you can't sell, you can't create a market anymore. You're stuck with it, basically. This is it. So the European clubs can come in, they can negotiate extremely favourable loan terms, or or you're stuck with your player that's not going to be in your 25-man squad. That's one of the problems. The Championship loan deals will again be deflated. Everything about it was half-baked and poorly thought out, and the stability that they thought it was going to create didn't create any stability at all, because it was still nuts on that last day. Is your squad your squad? No, it's not your squad, because there's Europe is still open, so you've got that added pressure. So it didn't do anything. If people thought it was going to focus Daniel Levy's attention and he was not going to leave it until 4:59 on the very last day to try and buy a player, that didn't work either, because he was still going after one of Aston Villa's players after their season had started, right up until the deadline, when he could have bought the man 2 months ago. It did nothing it was meant to achieve, and all because they want to be saved from themselves all the time, these guys. It's never a modicum of sort of control of the business and saying, well, look, if the problem last season, and it was the problem, was that English clubs were unsettling other English clubs, because there was only one big European deal that was a problem, which was the ongoing Coutinho thing with Liverpool and Barcelona. Everything else, Danny Drinkwater, Ross Barkley, all the other speculation and all the other players, Virgil van Dijk, that were going on strike, were all to do with English to English clubs. So it could have been solved. We can put our own deadline on, if you want, on August the 9th, but leave yourself free to trade with Europe if you wanted after that date. But no, we have to put rules in place, financial fair play and all of that. You can't just say no. You can't just take responsibility. You have to have layers and layers of red tape to stop you behaving in a way that is negative for your business. I don't understand it.
We love the drama, though, of the transfer deadline and the day itself. But did we get a sense of that this year?
Yeah, there were so many deals that went through. I was actually on TV when it was going through. I was like, oh, not a lot went through sort of in the last sort of hour, but that day was a very, very busy day. You were trying to keep up with deals, especially Fulham. We brought in quite a few players. Everton, yeah, exactly. And it was a bit of mayhem on the day. I agree with Martin, certainly when it comes to how European clubs can now negotiate better loan deals. For example, Bakayoko, he's expected to go to AC Milan, but the deal was being held up because Chelsea want as much of the £40 million fee that they paid to get him from Monaco, but Milan don't want to pay that. And they can just say to Chelsea now, well, actually, we'll go for someone else, because we can go for someone else, and you're going to be left with a player that is surplus to requirements.
You can pay his wages for the rest of the season.
Yeah, exactly. So they're in a better bargaining position, the foreign club. But I do think it worked out quite well in other ways. I think like the Hazard situation, he's not going to be leaving Chelsea, but say if he was to try and force a move away, Chelsea would just say, Bizarri's come out and said this as well, he goes, well, it's impossible, we just can't sign anyone. So for selling clubs, they just say, well, we can't get a replacement.
But you could say that anyway.
Yeah, you could.
You say that anyway.
You could.
See, so that doesn't actually change anything, because there was no early transfer window in place last season, and Liverpool just said no to Barcelona. And Barcelona came back and they said no. And they kept saying no, and you say no until August 31st, and then the problem goes away. It hasn't changed that. The Eden Hazard thing hasn't changed at all with the August the 9th deadline, because if you want to say no, you just say no.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter whether it closes on the 31st or the 9th, you know?
Do we have a real appreciation, though, Sam, of the kind of the intolerable... I would imagine the intolerable pressures of being a manager, certainly chief executives, for example, Ed Woodward or Mourinho at Chelsea, in those final hours. We don't have experience of that, of what it's like to have somebody relentlessly knocking on the door, email after email after email.
Sounds like working for a newspaper.
Martin, so just turn the BlackBerry off.
Well, just say no.
I think it might be the world's smallest violins for the chief execs of our Premier League. I think they've made this problem. They've made this problem for themselves. I mean, Manchester United didn't actually vote for it, so I think. To be fair, Crystal Palace didn't vote for it, and I think a few of those people foresaw the problems. I think there's a good chance that it might get looked at again. I mean, the impression I got last summer was that a lot of managers were sort of bleating to owners and chairmen and chief executives, saying, "Oh, this is awful." Was it Oxlade-Chamberlain was last summer as well? Was it?
Yeah.
So
Mourinho backed it last summer.
Right.
He was supporting it last summer.
And I just think they caved in too quickly without doing what football so rarely does, which is look at the unforeseen consequences. And Vaishali makes a great point about the loan system, because clubs now earn a lot of money from loans. I mean, Danny Drinkwater was being offered around for £14 million for a one-year loan. I mean, that used to buy you a Danny Drinkwater, not just one on a for 1 year. So I think it'll be much harder. The feeling amongst agents and chief executives is it's going to be much harder for clubs to negotiate really competitive loan fees, because the European clubs, for example, say Schalke, who are interested in Danny Rose, will be able to say, take it or leave it, we'll pay his wages and that's it. But that nice little revenue stream that clubs have now developed, where they get a loan fee, which for younger players is discounted if they play a certain amount of games, that's off the table. And if it costs them money, I think that'll be the one thing that will really persuade them to get rid of it, because in the end it is about the balance sheet, and they will feel if it's costing them money, right, we're going to get rid of this.
If only someone had seen this coming.
Some might say that's their job to see these things coming.
Who had a successful transfer window? Would Tottenham argue they had a successful transfer window? Pochettino said that they were brave. They then went and won at Newcastle yesterday. A decent start to the season.
Decent start. Fortuitous, I think. Newcastle could easily have equalised in the second half. I think it was a massive risk not to sign anyone, and what it left Pochettino with was having to field so many of the players who just came back from the World Cup. I mean, they came back to training on Monday. The feeling within the Spurs camp was that the players had just settled in on Thursday, and off they are to Newcastle on Friday for a game. And Pochettino was rewarded with very good performances from the players who returned.
Dele scoring, for example.
He scored, Vertonghen obviously scored. Harry Kane looked a little bit jaded, looks a little bit... he put in a committed performance as ever. But the
he doesn't score in August anyway, he should
exactly.
Have a rest.
But the real worry from within the Spurs camp was in the second half how tired the players might be. Would their energy levels dip? Would Newcastle get back in it? And they nearly did. And now their focus is very much on recovery. They were quite keen on giving every player, World Cup or non-World Cup, had a specific fitness plan given to them. They sent out a lot of their personal trainers to a lot of the players to make sure they were absolutely fit, because I think they foresaw a situation where they didn't necessarily sign any players. But it's a huge risk if they're... I mean, Son's away now for 3 to 5 games. If there is an injury to a key player, you look at that squad, and they've got Trippier to return, they've got Wanyama, they've got Lamela to return. It's a strong squad, it's a familiar squad, but you do wonder, competing on all fronts, going for trophies, what Pochettino will be left with if there are injuries to, say, 2 or 3 players, and that is the real worry, and only time will tell, really.
But they did get off to a good start, winning start at St James's Park yesterday. I think we've just about got enough time to talk Newcastle and their transfer business and Rafa's complaints over the summer, Martin. What are your thoughts on that particular relationship? Mike Ashley, Rafa Benitez, is that a sustainable partnership?
It's got 1 year to work itself out, and I'm not sure it will. It's just, I just think with a club, there comes a point at which you've got to start looking up rather than keep looking down all the time. There comes a point in every club, if you're going to make progress, when you just got to... And the weakness with Ashley at Newcastle is that he doesn't do that. I can see that he's running the club as a business. I do think there's a sort of great irony that everyone says about there should be more financial responsibility in football. And the minute someone starts running it as a business, everyone goes nuts because they're not spending £100 million on players. But I do think with Newcastle that there is a great and successful club waiting to be unlocked there, and that Ashley won't allow that to happen. I don't think he's as bad a custodian as a lot of people say he is, but I do think that with Newcastle, he suffers from a lack of imagination of what that club could become. Because they're not far away. I mean, they could easily have beaten Tottenham yesterday. I mean, they hit the post twice. And, you know, they're not a bad team. They've got a tremendous manager in Rafa Benitez. There is a great club there. waiting to break out that just needs to be unlocked. It was David Dean who said that there comes a time in every club where you've got to start looking at the top of the league rather than worrying about getting relegated all the time. And you know, you've got to unlock that ambition, and that's what needs to happen at Newcastle.
Yeah, sure. OK, we'll talk more about ownership of another club. That's coming next, because we'll talk Arsenal and Stan Kroenke about to take the club into private ownership at the Emirates. More on that next. Time is everything. Sam was at Huddersfield Chelsea yesterday. His column today is on Arsenal, not on Unai Emery, I should say. It's the demise of fan shareholders, signalling the end of an era for accountability at Arsenal and some of those colourful AGMs that we've attended in the past, Sam. What are your thoughts on Kroenke taking, Usmanov's decision to sell his shareholding? Stan Kroenke will buy it, and the club being taken into private ownership, and of course that ownership is Stan Kroenke's. Will be within the realm of Stan Kroenke's business empire.
Yeah, I haven't really seen it explained why a man who already controls the club. I mean, Usmanov doesn't have a seat on the board, does he? Famously, or didn't have a seat on the board. Why he needs to spend 600 million owning the whole of it? I'm guessing it's some sort of long-term legacy project that it was just tidier that way. But it's a lot of money. I think he's borrowed it. So to own the entirety of Arsenal. I mean, one of the consequences has been that those people who have single share stakes in Arsenal are having to give up the compulsory purchase of the remainder of the stock, and people are sad about it because it's one of the marks. I mean, one of the consequences is there's no more AGM, and when I was a Manchester reporter, turn of the millennium, that was one of the great events, was the Manchester United AGM. That's gone now, of course. Liverpool used to have one under the Moors ownership. Manchester City used to have one when Wardle and Makin were in charge. And although they were only once a year, they were sort of slightly kind of riotous occasions where people would ask questions that sometimes didn't get even asked by, I have to be honest, by the press. And they were for years and years, I don't think they were of much consideration to either the fans or the media, but as...
They were often punctuated by people complaining about the price of a pie.
Yes, I mean, it was absolutely... everything was on the table. Why haven't we signed... I remember one Liverpool shareholder making a long speech in it would have been about 2002, 2003. Why haven't we signed Michael Ballack yet? Why are the tickets so expensive? Why are the train times, changed to get to the stadium? But then people would pick up. There were very well-informed shareholders who would pick up the chairman on his remuneration, and it was great. It was lots of great British institutions. Marks and Spencers have one. They're very uncomfortable for the hierarchy. Really uncomfortable. That's good. That's a good thing. And although they're only once a year, and I just think they're healthy democratic processes, and the piece was really just bemoaning the passing of them, and also making the point that it's actually quite hard to mobilise supporters now.
I thought you weren't one for tradition. You were talking about Real Madrid. Oh, why does everyone have to sign Real Madrid? Just because they've got 12 Champions Leagues.
We can talk about Real Madrid, who of course entirely fan-owned, but only one man is allowed to be elected president by virtue of the rules that he's introduced. That's another story. But
and another show.
But the what I liked about them was just the sort of rawness of them. And often Ferguson or Kevin Keegan in his time at Manchester City would address the shareholders. Often the managers, they did it with Wenger as well, the managers were sort of brought out to quell the crowd because they could charm them, they had that connection with the shareholders. And I just feel it's the thin end of the wedge. I think when an industry or a way of life is taken over by a new power, and in football's case, in our game, it's venture capitalists, it's investors from overseas, largely from overseas, not entirely from overseas. It's done very gradually, so we don't really notice it. It's done incrementally, and this has been done over 15 years at lots of great clubs, to the point where we look around now and we say, when do the supporters have a voice? Mm-hmm. Do they get to voice their opinions on Twitter?
Saturday.
Or they can,
every Saturday at 3 o'clock.
I know what you're going to say, Martin. If you don't turn up, then they'll notice.
No, regime change at Arsenal was not achieved at the AGM. Regime change at Arsenal was achieved at the Emirates Stadium at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon or 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon.
What you mean by the fans or the results?
By the fans and the result. That's your forum. I totally understand Sam's point. I totally understand Sam's point about the sort of bear pit atmosphere you could get at some of the AGMs. And therefore, I can actually understand why Kroenke is going, right, I tell you what, we'll get
600 million,
we'll get
cheap at the
600 million, yeah, I've got that right there now. But at the same time, your voice as a fan is in the stadium. That's where you've got your majority. There's 60,000
but
and you,
but they
and
see
there's two of them.
their global. You know, there's fans that Manchester United fans, Arsenal fans, have never been to the stadium, never been in the country, and they're valued by these people as consumers just as much as the match.
But if Old Trafford goes nuts, do you know what I mean? In the end, the Emirates Stadium was going nuts. Either people either weren't going, or those that were going were spectacularly angry from the minute they got off the bus to the minute they got home again. And that's what changed it at Arsenal. That you can. At the last Arsenal AGM, the independent shareholders, the small shareholders, voted Sir Chips Keswick out as chairman, and Stan Kroenke 5 minutes later just voted him back in again because he's got 67% of the club. And then there was another one a couple of years ago where someone asked about Kroenke getting £3 million.
Management fees.
Management fees and consultancy fees. So he was being paid £3 million to consult in his own business. And someone asked Keswick about that, and he turned around and said, well, if we get any more questions like that, I'm closing the meeting down again. So, do you know what I mean? So at the AGM, you know, it was fun for us, but in terms of it was a limited impact. 60,000 people at the Emirates Stadium, with 30,000 people not turning up and the other 30,000 people chanting sack the ball from the minute the game kicks off to the minute it ends. They hear that.
But that achieves the change of manager. What it can never achieve is a change of ownership. I mean, we've had various people saying they can get rid of the Glazers. They haven't. They can't. No one's going to get rid of Kroenke. And you know, obviously Fenway and Abu Dhabi have got a much better relationship with their fan bases. But the notion that you can get rid of an owner, and I'm obviously at AGMs.
But they weren't going to get rid of them at the AGM, were they?
But they had that connection. They had to appear in front of them, and I do feel that with these overseas super rich owners, that thread between the fans and it's been fraying for years, and I'd say it's as good as severed now.
Can any good come of this for Charlie, of the change of ownership or the structure of the ownership?
I think he needs to build bridges with the fans, because I know Arsenal Supporters Trust were very upset about the fact that he's essentially going to go private, isn't it? It's one person owning the club. There is that feeling, as Sam mentioned, the accountability factor, that no longer can they now just ask questions in that AGM. And also, I think there's a question mark about his intentions for the club. Why has he decided now to buy the club outright? He already had the control, essentially, of the club with the 67%, whatever shares it was he had. So what are his long-term plans for the club? And,
I mean, that's presumably just he will be able to. The club will be worth even more money. Yeah. Based on he will have sole control of the club, and assuming that it continues to increase in value. Then
he's doubled. The value of the club has doubled since he took control.
Yeah, that would be my assumption. It would be worth even more money to him and his family.
Not all of which is anything to do with him, by the way. A lot of that is just to do with the television deal, you know, which Stan Kroenke has played no part in whatsoever. So he's lucky in that respect. I mean, whether that's lucky or just good business sense is another matter. But
they do have a new manager in charge, though. That's the one refreshing, or that's the one change of approach for Arsenal this season. How will Unai Emery get on as the Arsenal manager?
He's a very different manager to Arsene Wenger. Yep. Much more focused on tactics. We know if he's not coaching the players on the pitch, he's watching videos of opposition. He's got a very different approach to Arsene Wenger. It'll be interesting to see actually how they get on against City, because I actually feel that there's not that much pressure on Arsenal. Do people really believe they're going to, or expect them to beat City, who look so good in Community Shield? They're basically picking up where they left off from last season. So actually it'll be interesting to see how the players flourish under sort of a lack of pressure in front of their own home fans today. It's going to be interesting to see defensively how they do under Unai Emery. He has focused on that with sort of double sessions in pre-season, strengthening the defence, and obviously he signed quite a few defenders, and I think he's got 5 now. Koscielny will be coming back in January, and actually there was the option to buy Vida. Obviously, he played in the World Cup final alongside Dejan, and he said, no, actually, we've got enough defensively. And, you know, this is a side that shipped in, 51 Premier League goals last season. So that is an absolute priority for them. That's something he's worked on. So I think it would be nice to see how the balance between attack, we've got very good attackers, now how it kind of works with their defence now. But it's going to be a different setup. It's going to be very much a tactically based side, but it's a tough test against City. But I think they're not going to have a lot of pressure on them today.
Are the fans optimistic though? Are people optimistic about Arsenal?
Yeah, I know quite. I've been speaking to a lot of Arsenal fans in pre-season. They're very optimistic. I think they felt that Wenger's time had come to an end, and they wanted a fresh face, a fresh change. And I think Unai Emery, especially with his record in knockout European ties, they're quite optimistic to see what he can do with the side. I think they just feel like it's a new era, really, isn't it? Fresh face, a couple of new players, and let's see what they can do. Yeah, I think there's optimism there.
Has he got time on his side here? How much time will he be given here, realistically, Sam?
Ooh. I mean, there's a lot of people's reps at stake here. I mean, there's been talk about Ivan Gazidis leaving, but obviously he's the man that's now the power at Arsenal. Made that was quite evident when.
Can he possibly, having appointed Unai Emery, he's got his man, can he possibly walk away?
I was really surprised at this, yeah. So there's a suggestion, been quite strong suggestion that AC Milan want to recruit him. That's what we're talking about, right? Yeah. I'd kind of be amazed, really. I think he's worked extremely hard to build this extensive backroom staff. You've got a director of football operations, you've got Sven Mislintat, the new sort of head of recruitment. You've got Husfami in terms of contracts. He's changed everything. He's rebuilt the training ground. And finally, that last piece, Arsene Wenger steps away. I'd be sort of amazed if... I mean, I have no intelligence either way whether that's going to happen, but I know that he's obviously been under a lot of pressure, and if Arsenal fans are unhappy, you know about it. So there's been that. But I mean, if you're talking about AC Milan, they need a new stadium. I mean, that's the big issue with the Milan clubs, is that the San Siro doesn't take them into that top tier. They don't own it for a start, and Juventus are the only team that own their own stadium. Anyway, we won't go into all that, but it's a big project. So maybe that's interesting for him. But I would be kind of amazed if he walked away from this now, where Wenger is gone and Gazidis is Kroenke's representative. He's running Arsenal on the Kroenke's behalf. So. Is this not what he's waited for? That would be my question.
Well, how do you think the mood will be? We're going to the Emirates this afternoon, Martin. Vaishali will be there too. What do you anticipate? Because I'm still looking forward to the game. The new era, the new manager, the new coach, the fans in good mood. But then, of course, I just felt that this story about Stan Kroenke in the week buying the club lock, stock and barrel, that it had almost changed the mood a little bit, that it certainly affected it.
If they beat Manchester City, who gives a monkeys who owns the club? And, you know, whether he's got 67 or 100%, you know, it will be very, very short term, the move this afternoon at Arsenal, because it always is. I'm not sure. I don't think it's a free hit. I don't think it's a free hit. I think their fans will go there expecting them to give Manchester City much more of a game than they gave them yesterday. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they'll go there expecting them to beat Manchester City, because we can all see they're a good team. But last year, they got their clock cleaned by City on a couple of occasions, including one spectacularly cold night where they were 3-0 up after about 20-odd minutes.
That's straight after the League Cup final, wasn't it?
Yeah. And so I don't think the fans would be happy if City played them off the park again, you know, whether it was 2-0 or 3-0 or anything like that. They want to see some evidence, I believe, of change. They want to see some evidence that it's better than last year, that the Arsene Wenger era has ended and this is a new era and we are more competitive than we used to be. We're not just brushed aside by the likes of Man City.
Sure. OK, thanks, Martin. Yeah, if you're not happy, you change your manager. It looks like that's exactly what Leicester are about to. We're going to talk more about this story in a moment. Claude Puel about to be sacked by Leicester. They lost on Friday night against Manchester United. More on that coming next. Nothing worse than looking at WhatsApp, seeing someone typing, and then they go back online again. I think it's just happened. I won't go into it. Back at the Sunday Mirror this morning, the Fox Hunt, Claude Puel, about to be fired by Leicester. They lost 2-1 on Friday night against Manchester United. First Premier League game of the season. It seems the problems look a little bit deeper than that. Tom Hopkinson writing in the Sunday Mirror this morning that Roberto Martinez and Thierry Henry, Sam, of course, successfully guided Belgium to third place in the World Cup, that they could replace Puel. It's an extraordinary story after one game. Can you see it happening?
Well, certainly last season there was quite a lot of stories that he might be on his way, and they had a poor end to the season. So it's in terms of his relationship there, it's not implausible. I think those who were quite sort of well informed about it last season were pretty surprised that he survived. They won out of their last 7, so it was a poor finish, and sometimes it just seems strange to do it now. He's brought in a new assistant. I mean, generally speaking, the Thai family, the Srivad and Hana Prabhas, have been really loyal to managers. I know they get hammered for the Ranieri sacking, but they felt they gave him as much time as they could, and it would be.
It's not like Ranieri did a bad job there.
No, he didn't. To be fair, but I mean, what could they do? I mean, the next season they were just falling apart, weren't they? So it would be extraordinary. I think that's the feeling, that it would not so much be the sacking, it would be the timing of it that would be incredible. Yeah,
after one game, and Tom does say here that he's got 2 games pretty much to save his job, but even so. This is early, even by our standards.
Yeah, it'd be extremely harsh. I mean, Leicester played pretty well against Manchester United. I mean, that handball by Marty, what can Puel do about that kind of move by one of his defenders? There were really encouraging signs from the likes of Maddison. I mean, he hasn't even had time to really bring in all of the signings that they've made this summer and, get them gelled into the squad. So I think it'd be very harsh to make that decision. Even if the story says 2 games, based on the fact that they lost to Manchester United 2-1, they didn't get battered 4-0 at Old Trafford. I think it'd be extremely harsh.
Yeah, okay.
Having sold their best player.
Having sold their best player, yeah. £60 million for Riyad Mahrez. That's going to take a little bit of adjustment.
Yeah. It would be. It makes no sense that they
certainly makes no
that.
sense now. I mean, the time to do it was, and there was a case to do it at the end of last season, and to do it now, I mean. Yes,
you've just signed Vardy on a new. Vardy just signed a new 4-year contract. Okay, well, we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks with Puel. I'd like to chat about Liverpool and West Ham, because that's the first Super Sunday game this afternoon. You can watch that live on Sky from 12:30. Vaishali, Liverpool, are they ready? Are they ready to challenge? They finished 25 points behind Manchester City last season in the Premier League, but as Martin pointed out earlier they did beat Manchester City 3 times across various competitions.
They should be. They've made some really good signings. They've strengthened midfield, their attacking options in Shaqiri, and obviously the key one for me was bringing in Alisson. Not just off the back of what happened in the Champions League final. I thought Karius, he made mistakes in the Champions League semi-final against Roma, and crucially, I think it was the mistake he made against Tranmere. He came back into pre-season, and Klopp obviously saw that he hasn't yet recovered from what happened in Kiev, and so the opportunity came to sign Alisson, and he's looked very good. He had his debut against Napoli. He looks calm, composed. He plays from the back. His distribution's very good. He's quite an imposing figure. So they've now really strengthened across the pitch, and I think that if they're not going to challenge now, when will they do it? Really, they basically are building on a success from last season, which was getting to the Champions League final. They have to do better in the league, though. They only made top 4 on the final day of the season. So this is now the chance for the players who've been there now a season, and the new players who've had, they've had a long time in pre-season to get used to the system now, because Liverpool did their business early. So they've had time to play Keita, to play Fabinho, who's probably not going to play against West Ham. And so it's exciting times at Liverpool. And I think they have to be the club that challenges City based on what they've done in the transfer window.
Did they buy those players to cement their place in the top 4, or to win the title? I
think it was to win the title, yeah.
It's a big gap. 25 points is a lot to bridge, though.
Absolutely. It's a big gap between Manchester United and Manchester City, wasn't it? But I think experience will be key. They've had that season now where they played really thrilling football, and you feel like the balance between defence and attack is better now. this season. So now, with that experience, with a lot of the players, that Salah only came last summer, so now he's had a season. You feel like they can challenge. Yeah.
Against West Ham this afternoon. OK, we've run out of time, unfortunately. Thanks very much for joining us this morning, Martin Samuel, Vaishali Bhardwaj and Sam Wallace.